Alright guys, thanks for coming. As you said, my name's Snow. A little bit about myself. I am a professional social engineer. I've been doing this for a handful of years now. I won the black badge for the social engineering Capture the Flag at DEF CON a good handful of years ago. And actually 2 weeks ago on this day, my team and I won a really cool physical security challenge at a conference in Salt Lake City called SaintCon. So that was a lot of fun. In my free time, I like to play tabletop games, and I live in Salt Lake City. So I work for a company called MindPoint Group. They're based out of Alexandria. Oops, I went too far. And I oversee all their social engineering. So right now I'm developing the practice, and I'm doing all the social engineering work for this company. So I am very casual. Normally I'll finish my talk pretty fast and have time for questions. If you do have a question in the middle of the talk, please feel free to interrupt me. My feelings won't get hurt. Raise your hand, yell at me, doesn't matter. So I chose to do this talk for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is I see a lot of other companies that do physical security assessments. And when I'm looking at these companies that do it, for the most part, they're tailgating in, so they're avoiding people, and they're just plugging something into the network and they're leaving. You're missing a lot of things that you should be testing with physical security when you limit it to just that. So I'm going to be going over all the different things that I do when I'm on site performing these assessments. So I'm going to be going over OSINT, which is open source intelligence. That's what I'm doing before I go on site, where I'm looking online, what I'm looking for. Pretext development. A pretext is who you're pretending to be. So whether I'm impersonating an employee or a vendor, and then things that I always keep in mind when I'm creating that pretext. And then reconnaissance or recon. So when I'm on site, before I actually start performing the assessment, what am I looking for on the outside, on the inside, things that I'm always trying to make sure I keep in mind to discover. And then all of my on-site goals. So once I actually start to perform the assessment, everything that I'm specifically trying to accomplish. And then wrap it all up with some training. So when I talk about OSINT, I'm typically looking in 3 different domains. I'm looking for employees. And when I'm trying to find employees online, typically in social media, sometimes forums, things like that, I'm looking for a handful of things. I want to see their trappings. What I mean by that is, what are they wearing? Are they dressed up? Are they very casual? If they have badges, can I get a clear picture of a badge so I can replicate it? I want to see their job titles, if they're even out of the office. It's really important to see their trappings, because if I'm going to show up and pretend to be an employee, I want to look exactly like them. If everybody's casual and I show up in very professional business wear, I'm going to stand out. So the more information I can find during OSINT to blend in, the better. I'm also looking for vendors. So these are things like pest control, anyone who comes in and out of their building that they have a known association with. Same thing as employees, I'm trying to find, do they have badges, specific names. Again, if I'm pretending to be them, the more information, the better. And then lastly, when I'm doing OSINT, I'm looking at the company. That's a lot of, excuse me, Google Maps, their own website. Sometimes they'll put internal pictures. Company or employees on social media will post pictures. But the more I'm able to see into the company before I get there, gives me a better feel. So I typically start on Facebook. So I like to search people who work at my target company. And it will give you a list of people who list that. I love to focus on interns, unfortunately. Interns don't have a lot of internal training. Companies don't invest as much into them as they should. So they show up, they take tons of pictures, and I could use that to my advantage. So this first picture that says trappings, I'm able to kind of see what they're wearing. Some of them have badges, some of them are wearing them in different spots. That's very helpful for me. In this first picture, she actually tagged a lot of these other interns as well. So I was able to pivot and kind of search through their things. Viewing floor plans is one of my favorite things to find online. So this is a picture that she took on her first day looking into the lobby because she was very proud. But if I'm an attacker and I show up on site and I know exactly what the lobby looks like, I can walk in and know I'm going to go straight up those stairs. Rather than if I didn't have this visual, I'm gonna walk in and look around. I might have a target on my head a little bit more. Excuse me, the third picture, we have badges. And I could see what kind of badges, and especially that last one, it's a pretty clear layout. So this is something that I try to create before I even go on site. So if I have that, it really gives me a big heads up. Problems with policies. Has anyone seen something like this before? Something on a secure door, it says, check the badge behind you. Couple nods, yeah. So it's a good policy. I mean, it's smart. Make sure the person behind you has a badge. But they're also banking on the fact that nobody's going to be posting their badge pictures online, like this guy. So again, you have this on your door. Yeah, that's cool. But guess what? Now I have a Google badge, and I can tailgate, and someone looks at my badge. It's not a big deal. Another fun story is that I had a client in downtown LA. And before I went out there, I was doing my OSINT, and I found tons of pictures of their employee badges. So I was able to replicate them before I even showed up on site. But when I got on site, everyone had their badge, which I saw in their pictures. They were always at their hip, clipped, but they were turned around, so they were white, which was kind of weird because I saw all these pictures online. But I just turned mine around to the white, so I was able to blend in. So I asked my client after, I said, why is everybody's badge turned around? And he said, well, we knew you were coming. I knew there's tons of employees who post these pictures, so I thought it would be easier just to, make it so you can't replicate it. Replicating a white badge is a lot easier than replicating any other type of badge. So it kind of bit him in the butt, I think, a bit. All right, so floor plans, any type of building information or company calendars. I typically look at these places, especially if it's a shared building. LoopNet is a company that will rent out different office spaces. So I'm able to find a lot of information there. If the building has a management property, a lot of times on their website they'll say managed by whatever company. I go look up that company, and they provide a lot of information online. I've been able to find forms for their rentals to fill out for vendors. So I could pretend to be a vendor, send in the form because they give me the right contact information, and they're expecting me to come and they give me access keys. Little things like that. So one of the things I find on LoopNet is descriptions. Now I know what security they have in place before I go. I know who's in the building with them. So if I want to pretend to be seeing someone else, I have a list of names right there. Calendars are fun too. So about 50% of the physical engagements I do are actually with hospitals. And hospitals, for the most part, close down after a certain time for visiting hours. I've been lucky and I've signed up for diabetes class, mother birthing classes, like every kind of class you can think of. When I find the schedule, go to the room, leave to go to the bathroom, and nobody watches you. You're left to a building that's wide open to you. All right, watering holes. So when you have a really big campus or area, a lot of times employees like to eat out. Google has a cool thing called nearby. So what I'll do is I'll type in my target, and I'll click nearby, and I'll get a list of restaurants. And when I get those restaurants, during recon, we'll go and we'll visit them. And when we visit them, we're really doing two things. The first thing is we're trying to get close enough to employees to actually capture their badge credentials to replicate so we can get access later on. The other thing is we like to listen to small talk. We sat behind a table of employees and we heard them say how the CFO was out at some conference, I can't remember the name, and said that he wasn't going to be back till next week. We were able to use that to our advantage, go in the next day to the receptionist, say, hey, we know Bob's out at such and such a conference. I just have to leave this information at his desk. The receptionist thinks, oh, she knows where he is. She has to, it makes sense. And of course, they don't like follow me around, so I'm in the building without an escort. Recon via YouTube is one of my, one of my favorite things to do. Companies love to have marketing, interns, job postings. If they have a brand new building, they like to show it off. And what they don't realize is all the information in the background of the video. Sometimes they'll even be on their own website. So I actually have a 1:30 clip I'm gonna show next. So I want you guys to think, if I'm an attacker, what would I see in this video that I could use to my advantage? I mean, first 10 seconds. Like, that doesn't even make sense for the video. That looks pretty fun, though. Yes? The clothes? Yep, trappings, so you could blend in.
No one's over the age of 30.
Oh, that's a good observation.
I'm old. I couldn't fit in. I could try.
That's funny. I didn't catch that the first time. I like that.
Yeah, it's all laptops and coffee. It's like this.
Yeah, and Xbox.
It's not too staged.
It could be staged, but you are still able to see a good handful of things. So, sorry?
A lot of drinks on the table.
Lots of drinks?
Tea and water. Maybe you could offer free drinks and get
Some type of a delivery service or, yeah?
I'm saying, yeah.
So I pulled out just a couple stills from it, but you guys brought up really good points too. First few seconds, right? Exactly, yep, and that's, you could see exactly what type of reader. And the good thing is you know that's on the outside, so you're not gonna walk up to the door and try to open it and look like an idiot. I know that's where it's at, and I know it's in place. View right into the lobby. If I want to avoid the receptionist, I'll just go the other way. Badge placement, so she had it on a lanyard, he has it on his hip. That's something that I would like to keep in mind. I like seeing that too, because I feel like I have a little bit more flexibility, just if other people are using different things. His color is a little bit different than hers, so that's something that is important to note. Sometimes, especially in hospitals, different types, nurses and doctors might have different colors. So the more images of badges, the better. I just thought that was funny. I don't know why. This, you know, you get an insight into their environment. They're a Microsoft shop, but Chrome's running, so just kind of made me laugh. Yep, exactly what kind of servers. So videos are very big. When I'm doing my OSINT, that's one of the first places I look, other than social media for employees. Lots of insight. Again, rather than going in blind, if I know what's in place, it is incredibly helpful. So moving on to vendors, just like employees, as soon as I find them, I'll research them the same way. I'm trying to find out what they wear, if I can find out their schedules. If I do find out something like, if they have a company that use like Shreddit, that's something I'll find in videos. If I want to pretend to be Shreddit, I'll call saying, hey, we're going to pick up early if I know their schedule, and I'll go the day before and I'll try to pick up. We rent white vans, we get the fake decals on the side, as the more legitimate we can make it seem. This is a Google hack command that I like to use to try to find specific kind of vendors. So now I'm moving into pretexting. Again, who you're pretending to be when you go on site to perform these assessments. Do not do any of these. I do not know from experience, thank God, but it could have been really bad. Don't pretend to be a cop. That's just not smart, no matter what you're doing. And then depending on the state, some states are a lot more strict. So if you are doing these type of assessments and you want to pretend to be someone, I would definitely, you know, have a lawyer on speed dial. It's pretty smart. When I am creating pretexts, there are a handful of things I like to do. When I actually sit down and talk to my client before I go on site, I make sure they know who I'm going to pretend to be. That way, they're not confused. If I'm pretending to be an auditor and they have suspicious reports of a pest control company, they know it's not me, so it really gives them a heads up. I do have some clients that don't like me to pretend to be employees, so they want me to pretend to be a vendor. So things like that to keep in mind. And then pretext reuse. So this is using the same one over and over, especially for the same client, which I'm going to talk about in a second, has been a really bad idea. And then your appearance. If I'm going to pretend to be someone very high up in the company, I'm probably not going to show up in a taxi, maybe a nice town car. I always have business cards with me. Even if I can't find them, I'll still create something. There's something that just feels so legitimate about handing someone a business card. A lot of times people do not question it. Excuse me. All right, so I talked about pretext reuse and why that was a bad idea. So I had a client in the Midwest, and they had 16 locations. They wanted me to do all the locations by the end of the year, and they came to me in December. So that was exciting. So I had to do all these locations in a very short amount of time. But not only that, they said, okay, we want you just to pretend to be an auditor. And the only goals were to see if anyone verified me, to see what information I can get out of management, and to see if I can have management plug in a USB. So it was pretty limited scope, which was fine, but they did dictate my pretext, which normally I don't allow, and I really shouldn't have. So I go through my first 5 sites within, I think it was 3 or 4 days. They all went really good. I got all of the goals done. No one for the first 4 sites were suspicious. I said I was the auditor. This is what I needed. They gave it to me. Site 5 is where it got hairy. She was very confused. She asked a lot of questions. You could see in her face that she didn't believe me, but she didn't know how to verify me. So she knew that I was most likely going in a certain circuit because she had known where I'd already been because I'd brought them up to try to build trust. So what she did is when I left, she called ahead to the site manager for number 6. Said, hey, this is shady. I don't know what to do, but I'm just warning you. So I show up to number 6, and the manager asked me to have a seat in the lobby, and 5 minutes later, 2 police officers come up with her. So that was definitely a learning lesson for me. I will not use the same pretext over and over. And going back, I would probably spread out all those over like a 6-month period. But again, something to keep in mind, employees talk, especially if it is kind of suspicious in that short amount of time.
How'd you get out of it?
So I have something that's called a get out of jail free card. And so I handed it to her, and what was even better is she's calling her IT, to verify, and they weren't answering. So that was exciting. So I had to stay in the lobby and talk to the police officers till then. One of the police officers was completely annoyed. He was like, I don't know what's going on, but I have to wait here. The other one was like, this is your job. This is what you do. Like, I can do this too. Like, this is so cool. So like, I was talking to him for 5 minutes, so he was cool. But they finally were able to get a hold of the right person that they were able to verify who I was, and they let me go. Which made the rest of them really confusing, because in the process of them trying to verify me, the manager had sent out an email to all of the locations saying, this person's coming. So that was not a fun rest of the, 9 other trips. So.
What percentage of the time do you get caught?
It's pretty low, and I'll talk about that in a little bit because I actually tried to get caught on my last trip. So I'll get into that. But caught from the beginning, maybe 10%. So with pretext creation, it's also important. So you go in there, you know who you want to be, but it's important to have a backup plan and a backup to your backup plan. I have a client who is a Fortune 100, and they just opened up a brand new European headquarter in Amsterdam. So they wanted me to go and test it out. And so before I went out there, I couldn't find pictures on of the building or inside because it was a brand new building. Like, it had only been open a couple months. But I was able to find tons of employee badge pictures. So in my head, I was just going to make the badge picture, try to not talk to people because of my accent as much as possible, and see how far I could get into the building because the scope was pretty limited. They just wanted to see if I can get into the CFO's office, I believe it was. And in my mind, I was cocky. Like, I was like, that's easy, that's no problem. I have a badge, I'll get it up into the office. So this is why plan Bs and Cs are good. So I get there, I walk into the lobby. The reception desk isn't far away, it's right next to the door. There's armed guards. The elevators were in front of turnstiles that were badge protected. The elevators had a different badging system. The floors had a different badging system. But I walk in there, and the receptionist is like, who are you here to see? You shouldn't be here. I'm not expecting anyone. It's like, oh shit, I'm just doing recon. Like, I've already been caught. So that freaked me out, so I had to make up a story about waiting for a friend, and I waited outside. But I couldn't use it anymore. She saw me, and there's no way that I would be able to get through with an employee badge if she knew everyone. So, went back to my hotel room, cried a little bit, and then so I had to do some investigating on the company. So my backup plan that I had just created on the fly, which thank God it worked, but I was pretending to be from their Americas location in investor relations. And so I called ahead from a spoofed number that looked just like their America location. I said, hey, we're sending someone out who's meeting with potential investors. They love that. And so I said, she just wants a tour of the facility and a potential meeting spot to meet with these investors. So I show up the next day, I have like 5 people like, what can we get you? I was like, oh gosh, like just leave me alone, let me in. But no, they gave me a tour of the facility, so I kind of had to play it as well as I could. I explained how these investors were really concerned about physical security. They wanted to make sure the building's secure. Where are your weaknesses so we can work on them? I can get you money to fix these things. They were showing me everything that was wrong with the building. I was like, oh my God. They gave me my own badge, and at the end of the tour, I explained how I had a WebEx and I had to get on soon to meet with some people, and that I just needed a private area. So this is probably my favorite part. They put my actual name on an office and set me up with like my own Wi-Fi in there. So it was really, really cool. But pretext creation, always have a backup plan, because if you get caught right away, it really sucks. All right, going into reconnaissance. So I typically try to look at 3 different places. And this happens before I actually go on site to do my goals. So I'm looking at the perimeter of the building. I'm driving around, I go at the daytime, I go at night. I try to see when the busy times are, because if I'm going to tailgate, I want to know when all the employees are coming in and going. So I'm looking at entrances, so public and employee only. If they have public entrances, what are the operating hours? If they close at 6, sometimes I try to sneak in at 5:50 and go hang out in the bathroom for a bit. And then just all of their entry points is what I'm looking for. Again, nearby, when I'm doing recon, I try to capture employees' credentials through Rfid Cloner. So I try to go to those kinds of locations. And I'm also, depending on the building, if it's something like a hospital and I can go into the interior, I will, something that can't be noticed. And I'll look for things like what kind of access controls do they have in place? Do they have guards? Thank you so much. Do they have guards? All of that kind of stuff that really will help me out in the assessment. All right, so here's a risk chart, and I'm going to go back to it in a little bit. I'm sorry, it's a little corny, but everything I do when I'm on site performing my goals, I try to categorize it into a risk. So I always start with the lowest risk. If I get caught, can I talk my way out of it? High, if I get caught, like with the CFO's laptops in my hands, I cannot talk my way out of that. So I'm going to go through some on-site goals that I have, and then going back to that risk chart, I'm going to talk about a little bit more. A lot of people don't know that tailgating and piggybacking are 2 different things, but they are. Tailgating is when you're actually following people through a door, but they don't know it. Piggybacking is when you're still following people through a door, but they do know it. One of my favorite stories with piggybacking is I was at a building in downtown LA, and I followed this lady into the building. And she kept looking behind me like she wanted to say something. I could see it on her face. She wanted to stop me, but she was too embarrassed or scared or didn't know what to say. So she just went around about her day, and that was it. I was like, okay, cool, she didn't stop me. So I continued to do some of my goals. When I went back later that evening, that goal was to get the receptionist to plug in a USB and open up a file. So I'm sitting there talking to the receptionist, because she's finishing up something before she can do it. And I know people are behind me, but I'm not paying attention to them. And then I kind of turn around and I see it's the same woman. And it's security. So she's explaining to them that someone followed her in, and she's giving my description as I'm standing right there. Like, it was the most terrifying thing ever. She's like, yeah, she's short and white and chubby. I'm like, hey, right here. But like the same clothes I'm wearing. So security has their camera feed, and they're trying to pull up stills of me as I'm like 10 feet away from them. So that was like terrifying, but I didn't get caught. I was able to have the receptionist plug it in, open up my file, and I left, and they had no clue, and I was right in front of them. So it's kind of scary. Another of my goals that I do on site is, I call it document management. It's a really fancy way to say dumpster diving, because dumpster diving doesn't sound cute at all. But I'm looking for sensitive documents, PII, anything sensitive to the company. So I'm not looking just at dumpsters. I'm looking at trash cans. I'm looking at shredded bins. Sometimes they're too full and I can pull papers out. Employee desks. So this kind of falls under a clean desk policy as well. Are employees leaving things out that they shouldn't be, especially after hours? Are they printing things and leaving it on the printers? That happens a lot. And then elicitation. This is getting more into the social engineering part. This is where you're actually talking to employees and not avoiding them. So I like to ask employees for things. I like to ask them, like the receptionist, will you plug this in and open up a file for me? Can you show me the way to this? Can you let me into this area? Things like that, actually talking to them. Or if I'm doing more of an audit role, I'll actually sit down and ask them questions about their physical security, which they don't know I'm going to use to my advantage later to break in at night. My favorite pretext that I've ever used was for hospitals is that I'm a HIPAA auditor, which is really shady. But all the questions are regarding, they're actual HIPAA questions, but stuff, again, an attacker could use to their advantage. One of the questions is, how do you dispose of ePHI? So any PHI, like on a hard drive or anything like that. And one of the ladies one time told me, oh, well, we just send it to IT. And so, and she actually had, she literally picked up a hard drive and said, oh, we just send it to IT. I'm like, oh, do you need to get rid of that? She's like, yeah, I have to make a trip down, knowing that their IT was 30 minutes away. I'm like, oh, I'm on my way there. Do you want me to take it for you? She actually gave it to me, which I went to the lobby and I called my point of contact. I'm like, I'm not leaving the hospital with this. I'm not responsible for it. So you need to come pick it up because I'm too scared to take it outside of the building. But that pretext and talking to people has so far been golden. Any questions so far? Okay. Rfid cloning. So this is what most of the time we use to get us into the building. So we have a handful of different tools that we operate with us. My favorite is, it's based off of Bishop Fox's work, and it's a long-range reader. So a lot of the other readers have a very short range, and you have to do what's called the ass grab technique, which I'm not a fan of. But I mean, there's inches. So this new reader that we use, we actually get 1.5 feet, which is really, really far. So I'm able to put it in my purse and walk around and pick up tons of different credentials. Then typically I go back to my hotel. I make as many as I can because some organizations, different employees have different levels that they're allowed into. So I just try to make them all. That way, in case something doesn't work or something doesn't get me into the right place, I have backups. Non-destructive entry, clients are very scared of this. But this is pretty much your lockpicks, your shims, things of that nature. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because there's tons of amazing talks out there on this kind of stuff. Deviant recently did one for SANS, I believe it was, a webcast, talking about all different kinds of tools. I would suggest checking that out. A lot of people that say they do physical security assessments also just say they pick locks and that's it. I think that's kind of corny. I think, there needs to be a lot more to it than that. Not corny, that's the wrong word. There needs to be more than picking locks. But I will not pick locks unless the risk is worth the reward. If you get caught picking, your assessment's pretty much done. It's really hard to talk your way out of. I have been in situations where nobody's around and I've been able to pick, and that's pretty much the only time I'll do it. I got lucky once at an organization. They had a conference room door, and it's like the really skinny windows that you could see into, and they had a paper that said, financial audit and process, do not enter. I was like, I gotta enter. So I knew no one was around, it was after hours, it was quiet, so I was able to pick and get in and take all my pictures for evidence. But there are times that I'll do it, I just have to be smart about it. USB drops, so this is pretty fun. This is something that I've had clients that just want us to strictly do USB drops. One of the places we always make sure we do not put them is in parking lots, because you could get their patients, just random people walking by. If they share a building, other tenants, I do not want to be responsible for what they plug into their computer. So that's one of the things I try to avoid. I like leaving them just on desks, in mail rooms. And then my favorite is actually putting them in a white envelope. And when I get to the location, if I see someone's name on their office door, I'll write down their name and stick it on their desk. Excuse me. Yep, we'll do rubber duckies. We do those more for like red team engagements. When we do our USB drops for physicals, it's more of a proof of concept. It's a beacon, so we know if it's been opened. So we.
You know it's successful when you get a beacon back.
Exactly, and I'll show you that in a second. For red team engagements, we try to step it up just a little bit, and we'll actually send them with flowers or cookies or something pretty cool, which is a little shady. So we don't do this all the time, but every time we've done this, it's worked, which is really scary. And then you got to name the file something juicy, something people want to know about. I mean, if you have an employee that finds a file that says that, they're going to want to know what's on it. So I was able to grab some statistics for the last year of doing USB drops. So if I just left drops or USBs around with just on desks with just the USB by itself, it was open 20% of the time, which is still pretty scary. If I put someone's name on it and put it on their desk or like on an envelope, it was open 60% of the time. And so I was talking about the beacon. So the file on the USB will let us know if it's been open. One of my favorite things we just did is we actually have it text us. And so it's really cool if you're walking around on site and all of a sudden your phone starts blowing up. I'm like, yay, it's being opened. So that's pretty cool. We do something a little shady. If they open it, they get this error. So then they go open in another computer. So we'll see like 17 opens from the same USB on like 16 different computers. Kind of scary.
What do you think the reason why you get the jump in percentages if there's a name on it? Like they're more interested in.
They want to see what's on it. Yep, especially the file name.
Even though it could be a name that's like nobody works here by that name.
I always do names of people that are there. So I'll bring that white envelope and I won't put a name on it until I see an office. Or I'll see an office and I'll write it and I'll leave it in like a bathroom or on a table somewhere else. So I have to legit know it's their name. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Network security. So I kind of mentioned at the beginning, physical security shouldn't just be about tailgating and plugging into the network. That's true, but it still needs to be tested. So one of the things we like to do is still plug in, just do a ping scan, can we connect to the network? My favorite place to do this is in conference rooms. Nobody thinks, if someone's in the conference room with a laptop and the door shut, they're not going to interrupt me, especially if my laptop's plugged into the network. This is my absolute favorite part of physical security. It's just so tangible. But the thing about it is I never leave my client site with any of these things. I do not want to be responsible. If I leave a laptop in my car and it gets stolen, that's on me. If I'm coming out with all kinds of paperwork and it's windy, I don't want to be responsible for that either. But there's nothing like taking a C-level's laptop. It just feels so good. After hours access, same exact goals that I try to do, just at nighttime. We have different people that work at night, or we don't have anyone that works at night. It's really just testing their physical controls to see if I can get in. Sometimes I'll be able to get information during the day or actually get the RFID cards ready. And again, going back at nighttime and seeing if I do get caught. Going back to that risk chart. So I typically do around 4 trips when I do my assessments, not including recon. So my first trip, I'm doing the low-level stuff. If I get caught, I'm probably not caught that bad, or I can talk my way out of it. So I'll do the USB drops. I'll do cloning, because that's impossible to see. It's in my bag. I'll look around for documents, and I'll try to tailgate or piggyback. So that's the first trip. My second trip, I'm kind of doing stuff that's a little bit more risky. I'm actually using the badges I tried to clone. I'm talking to employees trying to get information, or getting on the network. And then my third trip is when I'm going after hours. I'm trying to pick locks or take things. But also, I do a 4th trip. And on my 4th trip, that's like beyond high, right? But I'm actually trying to get caught. I want to do things to see if employees are gonna stop me. I'm gonna ask them obvious questions. I won't wear a fake badge. I'll do anything I can. I'll piggyback and I'll be very loud about it. Like I'll be on the phone like, yeah, I can't believe she's letting me into the building. Things like that. But I want them to catch me because I want them to feel confident enough to catch me rather than a bad guy, right? I want to give them that win. I want them to tell their coworkers, hey, something happened, but I was able to stop them. This is what I think really makes it valuable. A couple little tips and tricks that I do when I'm on site. I mentioned sneaking into the bathroom. It is one of my favorite things to do, which sounds really creepy now that I say it. But so many times I've had a hard time getting into an area. I'll just go right before they close, go hang out in the bathroom till everyone leaves, and then I have an office to myself. I mentioned earlier a get out of jail free card. I know of other consultants who make fake get out of jail free cards. So if they get caught, they give them the fake one to see if they'll verify. That's pretty stupid in my opinion because you lose so much trust. All right, here's a fake one. All right, they question you. Oh, just kidding, here's a real one. Why are they gonna believe you now, right? So what I like to do is I actually bring out the statement of work that's signed by my client, and I use that as my get out of jail free card. If I get caught, that's good. Good job for catching me. Here's all the information. I'm not gonna mess with you for catching me. This is pretty fun. So if there's a shred bin or something that's locked, in my kit I always have a out of service or out of order sign. I'll put it on the shred bin, put just an empty box next to it. So when I come back, I just take that box, which is scary how well that works. Spill coffee. So this is something that I do typically on my second or third visit. I'll have a fake resume with coffee that looks like it's just spilled on it, and I'll ask the receptionist to print off my resume as I have an interview with the company next door. This works very, very often. The only times it hasn't worked is if a company has a policy where they're actually not allowed, the employees are not allowed to plug in USBs, which is a really good policy. If you're at an organization, I definitely suggest adopting that policy. All right, so training. So what do we do with all this information? Teachable moments is one of my favorite things to do. This is that fourth visit, or sometimes I'll do 5 and 6, depending on what my client wants. I'll even go back to the same people I contacted or piggybacked the next day, and I'll explain, hey, this was a simulation. I could have been a bad guy, and this is everything you gave me. This really, it's scary for them, but you know that they're going to talk about it. They know how that makes them feel, and they're not going to do it again. We like to do our security awareness trainings on site as well. I don't know the last time you guys did one, but they're boring. They're so boring. People are distracted. They click through, don't pay attention, they don't care. So how do we get them engaged? We like to do it on site using the assessments we just did. So you could watch a cartoon saying, don't let this cartoon tailgate you, or you could say, hey, we just tailgated 5 of your employees in this building yesterday. That's gonna make them really think about it and not wanna do it again. All right, so recap. I talked about OSINT, everything I look for online before I start the assessment. Pretext development, what I think about when who I'm pretending to be. Reconnaissance, when I actually go out on site, what I'm looking for, my goals that I do on site, and then talked about training a bit. Sorry, I talk very fast. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So what actually comes out of your engagements when you do it? Because it just seems like, you've done it, you write a report, and like, what happens?
So we do 2 things. So we do write a report. A lot of times they are recommendations that come with that. So if we are able to do badge cloning, for example, then we would suggest adding a second factor onto very secure areas like a pin pad or things like that. So sometimes our clients aren't aware of things that they can up their security with. So our reports do include recommendations. And then most of our engagements, we do the security awareness training as well that's built into it. So the question was, what were the difficult ones that I've done? Data centers are always going to be, have always been number 1 for me. Those are incredibly hard. The security controls that I've seen in some of the ones lately are insane, like iris scanning, man trap, stuff like that. Like, I'm not going to pull someone's eyeball out. Like, as much as that would be cool, I'm not going to do that. So data centers are always the hardest. The second one for me is small companies. I used to think it'd be easy. Oh, they're small, they don't know what they're doing. But no, everyone knows each other. Yep, exactly. So I have to pretend to be an outside source, but still everyone knows everything. So small companies are hard, but data centers are always the hardest for me. Yeah. So depending on the client, we do customize goals up a lot. So I have had data center clients where if I can't get in after so many days, they'll let me in a certain way, and they'll let me do clean desk policies, document management, things like that, and still see if employees stop me, but they'll let me in if I can't get in. So they're still getting some value out of the test. It's not like, oh, I tried, I couldn't get in. I still try to give as much as I can. So for Rfid Cloning, I have had issues with iClass in the past. That's one of the harder ones, but we're working on that, and I think we have something that works. So now I just need a client with it so I can test it out. But it's not too hard, especially with now the technology that we have. The only times that we do get defeated is if there's multi-factor. So if there's a print or code, we have to be really close and watching or trying to get the print. It's difficult when there's multi-factor. Oh, do I target terminating employees? No, I don't go after them, but I'll read Glassdoor a lot, which gives you a lot of information. I use Glassdoor a lot with phishing campaigns. So if I know everyone hates medical benefits, guess what? I'm HR and you guys have new medical benefits. But no, not on a personal level, but I will go and read reviews. I will look through Facebook profiles and things like that. So I have a background in special effects makeup. So I have been able to create a teammate into an old person, which was awesome because they tailgated and we had a wheelchair. But they looked like they were 80, 90 years old, and I was just pushing around like, yeah, I know you're so excited. And we were claiming they were the CFO's grandparent. And so we were able to get really far, and we didn't get caught. But we have uniforms. I feel like our office has turned into like a theater. Like we have hard hats and every like major like delivery, and so yes, we use a lot of that kind of stuff, and it makes it fun. I think having a standard set of questions to verify would be the most helpful thing in that situation. I've been in positions where they'll ask me, what was it? It was at a data center, and I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, and they said, oh, what's today's code? I'm like, oh shit, what's today's code? I don't know. So depending on how secure the environment is, sometimes places have rolling codes for that kind of stuff for verification, which was incredibly smart because I could not BS my way out of that one. But I think having a set amount of verification questions that maybe everyone should know, like, okay, who are you, maybe your manager, and the phone number where I can contact your manager. Stuff that people should know, because if someone was asking me, I would probably start to stutter. Hopefully I wouldn't show it, but I probably would. So I think that would be helpful. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep, and I try to avoid technical roles because I'm a female, because that's unfortunately how the world sees. I do more of an auditor, and I won't do the technical role, which it is what it is. I don't want to do things to stand out. So we do have different team members. If we are pretending to be like a telco company or something, I'll send one of my guys. And that is what it is, but it makes more sense. But yeah, I work with a team. So I've come to start to involve HR before we do these things. It's so much easier than them blocking it, as you know, because I've run into that 100 times. And it depends on the company and the policies. It's really hard. Some companies are a lot strict, and some are don't care. They won't do anything with the report. But the ones that do, they do like to sit down and talk to the individuals. Maybe you'll get a couple warnings before something happens. My goal is not to get anyone fired. That like makes me sick to my stomach to think about someone getting fired. But I do want them to become aware. So hopefully HR does have some type of policy where they could sit down and talk to them. Maybe the user has to do security awareness training again, or really think about what they fell for, something along those lines, but it is tricky. I also would look at the company policies and are they giving them additional training and additional work? Because unfortunately I see companies, yeah, okay, this person failed a phishing test 5 times, they're out of here. Okay, what did you do to help them? Did you teach them anything? Did you, after the phishing assessment say, hey, this is what you should have looked for? Any additional training, if they're not getting that, it's really unfortunate. So I think they need appropriate training a lot. They need to be worked with. They should not have administrative rights on their computer. trying to take it all the way down to the basics. If they're in a position like financial or something where a lot of sensitive data can be released because of them, then that's something to consider. Yeah, a job switch possibly. Yep. So yeah, my background, special effects, makeup, and acting has definitely helped a lot. Learning basics about physical security, going out and picking up books, watching presentations. There's a lot of good one out there. The people that I've worked with have all been penetration testers in the past. That doesn't necessarily help, but that's just kind of how I've seen them come into this role. But really buying toys and understanding them, like RFID readers, and practicing them, using them, doing presentations on research, things like that, I think would really help. And people learn differently too, right? Like the whole well, now I can't think of them, but I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. Here's my contact information if anybody has any questions later on and can think of anything. I'm also on Twitter, probably too much. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate it.